over 50 years now, boys and girls and mums and dads have read and reread Kenneth Grahame's magical story of Mr. Toad and his friends Ratty, Mole and Badger. 4 animals who were sometimes so stupid and sometimes so wise that they were just like human beings. For those who've not yet had the pleasure of their company, and for the thousands who'd like to meet them again, this is the story of The Wind in the Willows. The sheep ran huddling together against the hurdles, blowing out thin nostrils and stamping with delicate forefeet, their heads thrown back and a light steam rising from the crowded sheep pen into the frosty air. The 2 animals hastened by in high spirits, with much chatter and laughter. They were returning across country after a long day's outing with Otter, hunting and exploring on the wide uplands where certain streams which fed their own river had their first small beginnings. The shades of the short winter day were closing in on them, and they still had some distance to go. Plodding at random across the fields, they'd heard the sheep and had made for them, and now, leading from the sheep pen, they found a beaten track that made walking much easier. And it also responded to that small inquiring something which all animals carry inside them, saying unmistakably, "Yes, quite right. This way leads to home." "It looks as though we're coming to a village," said the mole dubiously, slackening his pace. The animals did not hold with villages, and their own highways normally kept well away from such places. "Oh, never mind," said the rat. "At this season of the year they're all safe indoors by now, sitting round the fire, men, women and children, dogs and cats and all. We'll slip through all right without any bother or unpleasantness. And we can also have a look at them through their windows, if you like, and see what they're doing." The rapid nightfall of mid-December had quite beset the little village as they approached it on soft feet over the thin fall of powdery snow. On either side of the street, squares of a dusky orange-red, where the firelight or lamplight of each cottage overflowed through the casements into the dark world without. Most of the low lattice windows were without curtains or blinds, and the mole and the rat looked in on gatherings around the fire and tea table, on laughter and gestures, on warmth and comfort. Moving at will from window to window, the 2 spectators, so far from home themselves, had something of wistfulness in their eyes as they watched a cat being stroked, a sleepy child huddled off to bed, or a tired man stretched before the fire. From one small window, the sense of home and its safety from the outside stresses of nature most pulsated. Clearly silhouetted, a cage, and its small fluffy occupant, with head well tucked into feathers, fast asleep. Then a gust of bitter wind swept by them. A small sting of frozen sleet on their skin woke them as from a dream, and they knew their toes to be cold and their legs tired, and their own home a weary distance away. Once beyond the village, where the cottages ceased abruptly, on either side of the road they could smell through the darkness the friendly fields again, and they braced themselves for the last long stretch, the home stretch, the stretch that we know is bound to end some time in the rattle of the door latch, the sudden firelight, and the sight of familiar things. They plodded along steadily and silently, each of them thinking his own thoughts. The moles ran a good deal on supper, for it was pitch dark and he was in strange country and was following the rat and leaving the guidance entirely to him. As for the rat, he was walking a little way ahead, as his habit was, his shoulders humped, his eyes fixed on the grey road in front of him. So he didn't notice poor Mole, when suddenly he stopped dead in his tracks, with his nose in the air, and stood absolutely motionless. You see, we humans have long lost our understanding of nature, and we have only the word smell to describe the whole range of delicate thrills which murmur in the nose of the animal night and day, summoning, warning, inciting, repelling. What had reached the mole through the darkness was one of those mysterious fairy calls, making him tingle through and through with its very familiar appeal, though as yet he couldn't think what it was. And then it was with him again as he stood in the falling snow, and this time he knew exactly what it was. Home, that was it, that soft touch wafting through the air. Why, it must be close by at this very moment, he told himself. His old home that he'd never returned to since that first eventful day on the river. And the mole sat down forlornly in the snow, for now he realized what had happened. He must indeed be near his old home, and sensing him go by, it had called to him. Small, shabby, and poorly furnished, his little home was missing him, and was telling him so sorrowfully, with the plaintive reminder that it was there and wanted him. "Ratty!" called out the mole. "Come back! I want you, quick!" "Oh, do come along, mole," replied the rat cheerfully, still plodding on into the darkness. "Please stop, Ratty," pleaded the poor mole in anguish. "You don't understand. It's my home, my old home. I've just come across the smell of it, and it's close by here, really quite close, and I must go to it. I must! Oh, come back, Ratty. Please, please come back." The rat was by this time very far ahead. Too far to hear clearly what the mole was calling, too far to catch the note of appeal in his voice. "Mole, we really mustn't stop now," he called back. "We'll come for it tomorrow, whatever it is you've found. It's late and the snow's getting worse, and I'm not sure of the way. Anyway, I want your nose, Mole, so come on quick, there's a good fella." Poor Mole dragged himself to his feet. He stood alone in the night, his heart torn asunder, and a big sob gathering somewhere low down inside him. But even under such a test as this, his loyalty to his friend stood firm. Never did he dream of abandoning him. With an effort, he caught up with the unsuspecting rat, who chattered cheerfully about what they would do when they got home. How jolly the fire would be, what a supper they'd have. But the rat never noticed the mole's silence and distress. At last, however, after they'd walked some considerable distance, the rat said kindly, "Look here, Mole, old chap, you seem dead tired. Let's sit down and rest for a while. After all, we can't be far from home now." The mole subsided forlornly on a tree stump and tried so hard to control himself. But the sob he'd fought with for so long forced its way up, followed by another, then another, till at last he gave up and cried freely and helplessly, realizing he had lost what he could hardly claim to have found. The rat was quiet for a while, and then said gently, "What is it, old fellow? Whatever can be the matter? Now tell us your trouble, and let's see if I can help." The mole was so unhappy, so sad, that at first he could find no words at all. But then, between sobs, he explained to Rat, I know it's a shabby, dingy little place, not like your cosy quarters, or Toad's beautiful hall, or Badger's great house, but it was my own little home, and I was fond of it, and I went away and forgot all about it. But just then, back along the road, I smelt it suddenly, and I called to you, and you wouldn't listen. But everything was coming back to me with a rush, and I wanted it. Oh, we might have had just one look at it, Ratty, only one look. It was so close. But you wouldn't turn back. You wouldn't turn back. The rat stared down into the snow and said nothing. He realized just how cruel he'd been. He saw it all now. He'd been so intent on getting to his own home with its food and warmth that he hadn't sensed the mole's anguish. So, setting off over the very ground they'd just covered, the rat said, "Come on, old chap, or we'll never get there." "But where are you going, Ratty?" said the mole. "We're going to find that old home of yours, Mole," replied the rat. "Oh, come back, Ratty, do!" called the mole into the darkness. "It's too late, too dark, and I didn't mean to tell you how I felt about it. And think of Riverbank and your supper." "Hang Riverbank and supper too," said the rat. "I tell you, I'm going to find this place now, even if it takes me all night. So cheer up, follow me, and we'll soon be there." And so they went back over their tracks along the dark road, with the rat keeping up a steady flow of cheerful talk. And when he thought he was near the spot, the rat said, "Right, no more talking. Business now. Use your nose, Mole, and give your mind to it." They moved on in silence for a while, and then suddenly the rat sensed that the mole was onto something. He fell back a pace and waited. The signals were coming through. Mole stood with his nose uplifted, quivering slightly and feeling the air. And then he began to advance, slow, steady, and confident, with something of the air of a sleepwalker. He crossed a dry ditch, scrambled up a bank and through a hole in the hedge, nosed his way over a field towards a small copse of trees, and his pace quickened as the signals became stronger. The rat, following at a distance, felt excitement, for surely now they were getting near the place. It was beyond the copse and halfway across an open field that without any warning the mole dived down a tunnel. The rat followed him into pitch darkness, and for what seemed a very long time they crawled through twists and turns until the mole struck a match. And by its light, the rat saw that they were standing in an open space, neatly swept and sanded, and directly facing them was Mole's front door, with Mole End painted in Gothic lettering over the bell pull at the side. And so Mole, in the company of Rat, had rediscovered his long-forgotten home. In episode 8, Mole plays host to some old acquaintances.